All right, everybody, welcome. I hope everyone is well. I've got a little bit of a different subject that we're going to talk about for you tonight. Something that usually we don't cover on this channel, but this is a subject that is sort of near and dear to my heart that actually affects me every day, as well as millions of other people around the world. So we are going to be joined by my good friend, Mr. Daniel Leonard. Daniel, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. So the main subject matter that we are going to be discussing tonight is diabetes. Diabetes type 1 and type 2 and the experience of living with it. And the impact that it can have on your daily life if you don't manage high blood sugars. So, yes, welcome to the chat, man. I hope everything is well, and yeah, thank you for doing this with me, man.
No problem. Things are probably as well as they can get considering, but there's a lot going on in the world, but
that is very true, man. That is very true, man. I really hope things do get better and stuff like that. So, yeah, you know, this is typically subject matter that normally is not discussed. You know, we talk about train stuff and other things on this channel, but like I said, you know, this is something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. So, my name is Tony Ortega, and I am now a type 2 diabetic. I was diagnosed in June of this year. With an A1C of 11.4%, which is pretty high. That's if you want to think of it this way, that is an average blood sugar of about 280 milligrams per deciliter. That is really, really pretty freaking high. And so I have actually gotten it a lot lower since then. I was able to arm myself with the information I need to combat diabetes, and I think that hopefully we can do the same. So I will put the caveat out here at the front of the show that neither myself or Dan are not doctors. We're not medical professionals of any kind, so please take this as just a bit of information. But if you feel that you are showing signs and symptoms of diabetes type 1 or type 2, please go have a word with your doctor. Make sure that you get a very simple blood test. It's called a hemoglobin A1C, and they will use that. What a hemoglobin A1C is, that is a simple blood test that is used to estimate roughly what your blood sugars have been doing over the course of the last 2 to 3 months. And this is typically the sort of blood test that is actually used to determine whether or not you have diabetes. And then they'll determine further whether or not if you're type 2 diabetic or if you're a type 1 diabetic. But an A1C test is absolutely important for diagnosing where your blood sugars are, what your blood sugars have been doing. Another blood test that is actually fairly common is a spot glucose check that just tells you what your blood sugars are doing now. But I think we'll get into that a little bit later. So, yeah, Daniel, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Well, I've actually located in the state of Idaho. I've lived here for 17 years, and my diagnosis was for type 1 was August 26, 2012. So it's been over 10 years now, and there's some rough patches, but it's been okay. No complications so far, so fingers crossed there's none in the future. But
yeah.
And for me, they did the whole spot test. They didn't do an A1C because what happened was I went about a month with symptoms, and I've never really addressed it. I thought I was just sick,
Mm-hmm.
And my mom took me to the urgent care on a Sunday morning, and they did the glucose test, and it was about 400 milligrams per deciliter. So, and that's with type 1, usually you'll always be that high when you're diagnosed because there's no insulin. So we'll get into that later.
Yeah, the thing about type 1 diabetes is, you're kind of afraid of, essentially your blood sugars potentially running away if you don't have some kind of insulin to counteract that. So how I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes is that, my initial symptoms were I had dry mouth, which is fairly common with diabetes of almost any sort, what type 1 and 2. And I'll put it out there. We're not going to talk about gestational diabetes because that's a completely different topic that is targeted for pregnant women. So how I found out I was diagnosed with, how I found out I had type 2 diabetes is that, the symptoms I had as I had night sweats, some pretty severe cases, like I would wake up drenched in sweat. It was like I got out of a swimming pool, essentially. It was just that bad. The bed was soaked. The pillow was soaked. I just couldn't believe how hot I felt. The other unmistakable symptom that is common with diabetes is an insatiable appetite for water, an unquenchable thirst for water, essentially. And I remember one night waking up in one of those sweats and grabbing like a 40-ounce glass of water, and I just gulped that down like it didn't exist. It was.
Yes, I've had that too. Like I went through like 20 16-ounce bottles of water in like a few hours. It was insane.
Oh yeah, that is real insane. And then the other thing I started noticing was more frequent urination, and I think that was also connected to not only the diabetes but also the frequent drinking of water. So, those are the. Go ahead.
The reason for the frequent urination is that because the body knows there's too much sugar in the blood, it tries to filter it through the kidneys and through the urine.
Yeah.
So that's why there's frequent urination, trying to get rid of the sugar.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. I didn't think about that at first, but I started putting 2 and 2 together. So thinking, I might have diabetes. I better make an appointment. So I did set up that appointment with my primary care physician, my doctor. And so he ordered a hemoglobin A1C, and the test results came back at 11.4, which again is pretty freaking high. And so he ordered an appointment. He scheduled an appointment for me to be in the next week. It's basically ASAP is what I'm trying to say. And so we went over that, and I actually had a few other problems that popped up as well, such as high cholesterol, completely unrelated condition, but overall it can have a massive impact on your health. So what's the main concern you would look out for diabetes there, Daniel?
Well, for type 1, the 2 major areas is the kidneys and the eyes. Those are like the primary complications for type 1. And I've looked at, according to the JDRF, 1 in 3 diabetics will suffer chronic kidney disease, and that's a very, very high number. And so kidney failure is a big concern for diabetics. And then, of course, blindness. Diabetes is the leading cause of new blindness cases in the United States. So that's another big concern.
That's an absolutely huge concern, and the same impacts type 2 diabetics as well. And furthermore, not only does high blood sugars actually damage your kidneys and damage your eyes, but it also damages your nerves. A lot of nerve damage can result from high blood sugars. And diabetes type 1 and type 2 just can wreak havoc on your body if you do not control it. So both Daniel and I urge you to get it under control as soon as possible to better your chances right now, rather than later on down the road when you're seeing these health problems manifest themselves into existence. Give yourself that fighting chance to battle diabetes, to win against diabetes, and to maintain those blood sugars to the best level that you can. And you could do this by simply checking your sugars a couple times a day. I think for type 1 diabetics, correct me, Dan, if I'm wrong, is it more frequent for type 1s to check their blood sugars, probably like 5-6 times a day, something like that, or however much you would like,
Mhm.
essentially.
It should be as many times as you can,
Hmm.
unless you have a CGM, but we can get into CGMs later. But typically, a normal blood sugar is like 100 milligrams per deciliter. So you want to keep it around there.
Hmm.
And the more you test, the better you can keep it there. So you can test anywhere from 5 to 12 times a day. And your primary testing times is morning and before meals and before night and before bedtime. So those would be the biggest times to test.
Hmm. For me, with how I feel, with how my blood sugars are now, I feel like I've got them pretty well under control. I test 2 times a day, but sometimes a little more, just to
Mhm.
basically see what my blood sugar level is doing. And I feel that if it's a little high, I'll just, because I'm actually on metformin, I'm not on
Mhm.
insulin, just so you know.
Yeah.
And my doctor did talk to me about that. If I didn't drop my A1C levels down to a good level, he
Yeah.
might have had to start me on insulin. It's fairly
Yeah.
rare for type 2 diabetics to be on insulin, but there are those cases out there where type 2 diabetics can go on to insulin. But very fortunately for me, my most recent A1C test back this last September, just a couple of weeks ago, in fact, when I had my blood checked again, it came back at 5.7. So that was a significant drop from
Really?
11.4 to 5.7, which is almost normal. And I'm going to do my best to keep working hard at,
Yeah.
keeping those levels there. If I cannot get them lower,
Mhm.
hopefully I can. You Uh, so what I tend to do is because now I actually have a plan of attack worked with my doctor, to
Mhm.
keep my blood sugars in check, that I will be doing A1C test every 3 months, because
Yeah.
I want to know what my blood sugar is doing. I,
Yeah.
I feel like it's important to have that information in hand,
It is.
you know. Uh, what about you, Daniel? Do you get A1C checks every so often?
It's usually like every 4 to 5 months. Like my doctors are usually not too worried about my A1Cs because I've been like below 10 almost every time. So it's
Hmm.
my recent one was 8.1. So it's elevated, but it's not like detrimental yet. So
Hmm.
got to get it better. My last blood
Yeah.
sugar reading was 179 today. So like it's not terrible. It's getting better.
Hmm. My last blood sugar reading before I ate a sandwich was like 104, I believe it was. So again, that was pretty dang good. And I feel like that, if I keep it to the low 100s to the upper 90s and make that sort of the target,
Hmm.
then I think I'd be very well off. And I think that sort of way of thinking for diabetics in general, give yourselves a target
Hmm.
to manage, to aim for when it comes to managing your blood sugars. Do you personally feel that is important?
Hmm. Oh, definitely. I try to be between 100 and 120, but like it's been really hard lately for some reason.
Hmm.
And that could be stress doing that because there's a lot going on in life, you know? So like
Hmm.
rent prices are ridiculous and yeah, just trying to keep things together and making ends meet is stressful enough. And stress will raise blood sugar. So that
Yeah,
makes it hard.
and how your body produces glucose. Your liver releases glucose into the bloodstream. And your body uses glucose as a form of energy that it needs to go about
Mhm.
your daily activities and stuff. So stress can actually activate that hormone and increase it in your bloodstream. And that's not good. That's not good, because stress is bad. It's not
It's this
it's Go ahead.
it's it's this vicious cycle where you're like, oh, I got to take care of diabetes, but you stress out about taking care of it, and then it just keeps getting worse and back and forth, and
Hmm.
so you got to find a way to basically manage stress. And part of my way I do that is like I bowl a lot, like 20, 30 games a week. I used to play hockey and I want to try to get back into that.
Hmm.
So try to keep that all help keep the stress down with that.
That's another thing to keep in mind too that can be very important is exercising, diet and exercise
Hmm.
as much as you can. I have to admit I haven't been out much recently, mainly because of all the smoke filling the air that finally cleared out recently. And so it's been raining this weekend, which feels nice. So it's a lot easier on my sinuses, because
We got
otherwise
some rain here this past weekend.
Oh yeah, that's good. So, did you guys get any smoke down there in the area where you live?
Not really. It's actually been really good this year.
Mhm. That's a plus for Treasure Valley. I can guarantee that. But we got
Yes.
hit with the smoke, bud, because we have several forest fires up our way.
Yeah, I heard
Absolutely a
about
thing.
those.
Yep. So, uh, so how I came down with diabetes essentially really was more lifestyle than anything. I was significantly overweight. I was 293 pounds when I was diagnosed with diabetes. Actually, I was 275. 293 was actually before my actual formal diagnosis of diabetes medically. So by that point, I had actually started willfully losing weight, started going to the gym, started going to doing bike rides, all that stuff. So, that was a huge step in the right direction because I already knew I had diabetes before, the formal medical diagnosis came in. So that was an absolutely huge step in the right direction. So currently I weigh about 245 pounds. So to put that into perspective, when you lose about 45 pounds essentially from 293 to 245, it's about 47 pounds actually. That's a huge improvement on your body. I'd like to actually set an end goal weight of getting down to about 170,
Hmm.
and go from there.
Yeah, that'd be
Definitely,
really good.
yeah, keep in shape, because type 2 diabetes typically develops. Now, I've heard that some people can be genetically predisposed to type 2 diabetes, but it is primarily a metabolic disease that can develop due to excess weight gain because your body
Yep.
stores sugar as fat.
Yes.
Absolutely. And you're putting yourself at extreme risk for other things, besides diabetes. You're talking about heart disease. You're talking about various types of cancers even. So
Yes.
you really have to think about this sort of stuff, and why you need to be more fit and healthy,
Hmm.
So I
Well, another
developed
issue,
Go ahead.
diabetes actually does raise your risk for all types of cancers too.
Hmm.
So it's probably not a lot, especially if you keep blood sugars under control,
Hmm.
but it does elevate those risks. So
Yeah, it absolutely does. It absolutely does. So if you have questions about diabetes, Daniel and I actually provided links. We put them in the description in there below the video, and you can actually check those out at any time at your leisure. And we put some good ones in there from the Mayo Clinic and various other sources. So we put in some legit ones in there.
yeah, the
So,
JDRF, they're the that's the Juvenile Diabetes Research
mhm.
Foundation. They are dedicated primarily to type 1. So like if you have a question about type 1, that's definitely the place to go.
Absolutely is. And if you have type 2 diabetes, I put a link in there to the Mayo Clinic about type 2 diabetes.
Mhm.
And so the key thing that you have to look out for, when it comes to managing your blood sugars, when it comes to managing everything, you do have the very much the figurative concern of other health issues developing later on in life, some of the aforementioned things like kidney disease.
Yes.
And so I would like to know from your side of things, Daniel, what it has been like, how diabetes has impacted your day-to-day life in over the course of 10 years. Since I'm fairly a new diabetic, I don't have as much, historical data in my mind what it's like
Hmm.
living with diabetes. But what has it been like with you? Would you like to share some of your key experiences that you have gone through in the
Uh,
past 10 years?
I think it was more. It impacted my life more in the early stages, like the first year or two, because you're like it's new to you and you don't have the experience of taking care of it and everything. So it's like overwhelming to an extent. And it's also like emotional too, because like for me, I was at 20 years old, I was diagnosed, and I've never been to the hospital, never been to ICU, very few medical records, and when you go there to the hospital to get checked out and they say you're staying in the hospital in the ICU, like it's kind of like a huge shock because you think you're healthy and then all of a sudden you have this disease and it's like this moment like what the heck, you know?
So I have to ask you, when you were in the hospital, was there a process that they had to go through that you put you through to get your rather elevated blood glucose level down? Did they have to give you some kind of insulin? What did they do?
Oh, it's pretty terrible to be honest. Because it was the ICU, they did blood
Mhm.
work and everything every hour, and I was just tired. I wanted to sleep, and I couldn't because every hour they're waking me up to draw blood and everything, and oh, it's just a nightmare. But they had me on. I think I went through like 20 IVs, multiple insulin drips, multiple magnesium drips, because what type 1 diabetes does is it destroys all your electrolytes, like eats all of it up. So I had basically had no magnesium, no potassium. It's just all gone. So they had to replenish all of that before we even think about getting released from the hospital.
Mhm.
So, and then the magnesium drip sucks because if it's not calibrated right, it burns when it goes through the body because it's
Mhm.
magnesium. So I've had this burning, and I had to tell them like, "Hey, this isn't comfortable." Like, and then they adjusted it to slow it down, and it got better. So,
That's
but
absolutely awesome to hear, man.
so yeah, like electrolyte imbalance is a big deal, especially when you're in DKA, which is diabetic ketoacidosis. If it's basically your blood's acidic at that point, and it's not good for any part of your body, especially heart, brain, all of it. So,
Absolutely. When I was first diagnosed, um, my A1C, like I said, came back at 11.4, which averages my blood sugar up to or about around 280 milligrams per deciliter. And my doctor and I talked about it. It's like, well, don't be surprised if your blood sugars went over 300 on a few occasions at some point
yeah.
in the period between, say, like March, April, May, June, March, April, between March and June, essentially.
Hmm.
And I'm not
Oh,
surprised about that either, because I did drink quite a lot of orange juice in that period, and I'm pretty
yeah.
sure that's one of the things that jacked up my blood sugars to the high level that it did. I was also eating a lot of fast food, eating a lot of Chinese,
Hmm.
General Tso's chicken, for example. That sauce they put on the most of the
Oh,
stuff.
yeah. Those
Oh boy.
sauces have high sugar.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I can basically recount the sort of things I was eating and drinking. So I was not being very careful with what I was
Hmm.
eating then, but I didn't know that I had type 2 diabetes
Yeah.
right at that point. It's when some of the key symptoms started showing up, such as the excessive drinking, some of the excessive
Yes.
sweating, and the urination. That's when I began to think about it.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
That's when that was the point where I kind of figured something was wrong too.
Mm-hmm.
But for type 1, it's different because like it's so sudden. Like for type 2, they may go even a year before they realize something's wrong, or even 2 or 3. But for type 1 is such a sudden switch, like because what happens with type 1 is the immune system destroys the beta cells in the pancreas which produce the insulin. So there's an immediate effect on the body. So you know instantly something changed. Whereas type 2, of course, it's an insulin resistance. You may be going years before you even notice it.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, in 2017, I was diagnosed as pre-diabetic. Then a bunch of stuff happened to where essentially I couldn't get in to see a doctor to get regular checkups and stuff. The basic things that sort of keep you healthy. So in reality, I really don't know how long I was actually living with diabetes apart from my formal medical diagnosis.
Exactly.
So I could have had it a couple of years already and not even know it. So I hope I didn't. I really hope I didn't. But the signs, some of the telltale signs there, especially in the last couple of months prior to my medical diagnosis, that I sure as heck had it. I really did sure as heck have it.
hmm But for me, I think it affects me mostly at work and playing sports. Like if you're just relaxing at home watching TV, it's not really like a big deal. It's when you're playing sports for type 1 that's a real problem because what happens is when you play sports, like especially hockey, your
Mhm.
adrenaline kicks in and it releases that sugar into the blood. So the sugars will probably skyrocket like 400 milligrams per deciliter. And then when you're done with the sport, in my case, it will crash to below 70 or 60. And
Wow.
that's pretty dangerous. So like
Yeah, yeah.
that's like the biggest impact I felt with the whole thing.
hmm I think you were telling me last night when we were talking about doing this podcast today, what it was like when you had the blood sugar level of like 23 or something like that. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh yeah, it was actually 27. That was the lowest I've ever been. And what happened was the shaking stopped actually. I think at that point the shaking just stopped. Uh
Yeah.
Sweating and my vision was so blurred. I think I was almost at the point of passing out, but I don't know. Somehow I got food and got the sugar to normalize, and I
Mm.
don't remember much to be honest. I actually recently had a pretty bad one from work.
Mm.
It was so bad. I don't even because it was near the end of a shift. I don't remember the last 40 minutes of the shift and don't remember driving home.
Wow.
Yeah, that one was really bad.
That was really bad. And so, like for you, because you're type 1 diabetes, your blood sugars can go from one extreme to the other. So the key thing that we're talking about here right now is that hypoglycemia, which is low blood sugar, hyperglycemia is high blood sugar. And
hmm
so when you're diabetic, this can apply to a slightly lesser degree with type 2 diabetics, but it still applies. Is that this can be dangerous bad. So according to the medical field, essentially, for a normal person that does not have diabetes, ideally your blood sugar should be between 65 milligrams per deciliter. In Europe, they measure in millimoles, but I don't really know what those numbers would be exactly. I don't
Oh,
have a
I don't
conversion kit
either.
with me. Millimoles, yeah. And then, so 65 on the low end and 100 milligrams per deciliter on the high end. So that's generally acknowledged to be the normal range for people that are non-diabetic.
Mhm.
What is your assessment of that?
Oh, it's accurate. They've had years of research into this, so I'm pretty sure it's fairly accurate. For me, though, 70 is too low. That's when I start getting like shaking. Like with most people, when they get low, their hands will shake uncontrollably. So you would
Mhm.
notice when you're low, and mine start doing that at 70. So that's why I want to stay around 100 because 100 I feel really comfortable with.
The lowest blood sugar that I remember actually recording to date was something like 73. And I felt just perfectly fine.
Mm.
My mother, who is also a type 2 diabetic, so this is where some people would speculate the genetics for us, possibly. My mother was also type 2 diabetic, but quite honestly, we tended to
Mm-hmm.
eat a lot of the same foods.
Mm-hmm.
Because type 2 diabetes primarily is a metabolic disease that is brought on by poor lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that genetics doesn't have a part in it, but I do think more lifestyle than anything. So when my
Yeah.
mother was having low blood sugars, she said she would get shaky hands and her body would just shake. So I remember actually seeing this. So I would make her some kind of food. I would make her a sandwich, something to help bring her blood sugar level up. I think I even gave her an insulin pill one time. Glucose tablets, what they're called.
Yes.
Yes. So for type 1 diabetics, generally, some type 2 diabetics, take those little glucose tablets if you absolutely need them. Otherwise, they are disgusting.
They're actually not bad. They they're easily portable. Like they don't melt like candy in the heat. Like they're really small, so they're easy to put in your pockets and stuff. And that's what I typically go to when I'm out and about. But if I'm at home, I'm not too worried about because I got like orange juice here. I got sodas because I'm not the only one that lives here and everything. So I do have options at home. So
Mhm.
it's just those glucose tablets make it easy to go out and about.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So when it comes to management of diabetes, for me, I take my metformin in the morning, one in the morning, one at night, sometimes two, then one at night, but usually one in the morning, one at night. And then just careful eating throughout the day, and then just exercise if it's possible for me to get out. Sometimes it's not, but um, so for you, what is your daily routine like when you're having to deal with your medications?
Oh goodness. Depends on a lot, but when I wake up, typically I should check sugar, see what it is. But the issue I have is my sugar's always high in the morning, and I know that because I've taken my sugar before I sleep, and it's like 90, 100. When I wake up, it's like 280. And I don't know why. I can't explain it. It's just how it is. And typically it's easy to bring down. So I think it's something with waking up. Like what happens
So
is the well, they say that the liver releases sugar to help you wake up in the morning, and that could be why it's going high in the morning.
I was
So,
just I was just about to bring that up, that your liver releases glucose while you sleep during the night to basically sustain you.
yeah. And of course, with type 1, when you don't have insulin, it doesn't go away. So,
Mhm. Yeah.
and yeah,
No.
diabetes affects sleep a lot. Like, it can cause a lot of sleep disturbances. But the next thing I would do is take I take Traceba, which is a long acting insulin. There's the long acting insulin, which I take once a day. And then there's the Humalog, which is once I use pretty much for every meal. If I'm eating something, I gotta take it. And then that's basically all I have to do. Luckily I'm not on any like pain medications or anything else. So those are the only two
Mm.
medications I take.
So thankfully, that's a lot though. So in a way, type 2 diabetics are kind of lucky that we don't have to take something before meal, ideally,
Mm-hmm.
Metformin, does have to be taken with something to eat, but I think that's more to deal with the specifics
Mm-hmm.
of the medication than anything. But metformin, what it does, and I'm sure you already know, that it helps you actually lower your blood sugar in a similar but different way to insulin.
Yeah, metformin, from what I understand, is it tells the pancreas to produce more insulin.
Mhm.
So metformin doesn't work with type 1 because type 1 doesn't have the ability to create more insulin.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you're stuck on insulin injections.
yep. And this is the other thing that I've been reading into a lot as well. Is that type 2s tend to have insulin, not just insulin resistant, but also insulinemia,
Mm,
which is basically insulin resistance. So
yeah.
we can still produce insulin. Problem is, we just don't produce enough of it to combat sugars
Yep.
every time we eat something.
Correct.
Whereas for someone like yourself, Daniel, you have to take some sort of insulin every single time you snack. Or is that am I actually
Yeah.
overstating that there,
Nope.
or no?
Not at all. It's anytime I have something with carbs, unless it's only like 5 carbs, I have to take insulin. Like
Mhm.
if every meal I have to take insulin. If I'm eating like 30, 40 carbs, insulin, like that's how type 1 is.
Mhm. And that's the other thing, that my doctor and I talked about is the American diet is trash because a lot of our stuff has carbs, a
Yep.
lot of very high carbs that has a lot of high impact on your diet and a lot of
Yep.
high impact on your metabolic health.
And I
That's why,
we've
go ahead.
discussed this before the other night, and if that's mostly because of the 1950s when the food pyramid was a thing.
Mhm.
They decided that the high carb stuff like your wheats and grains, stuff like that, should be your base for your diet, and that was probably a very misguided effort.
Yeah, I mean, I could see where they were going with that. But there were a lot of very well accredited doctors. I wish I could cite some of their work, but they're like, we need to change our stinking thinking on that. Absolutely,
Mhm.
need to
Yep.
change our stinking thinking because we're
Yeah. Like,
eating a rather inordinate amount of sugar and an inordinate amount of dairy.
yeah.
Dairy's not bad to have occasionally, but you don't
It's
have to have it
not
all the time. Go ahead.
like, yeah, dairy can be actually good for you, but the sugars in it can be bad, so you should probably limit how much you're eating of it. And then you got some oils are actually okay. And I'm actually hearing recently that vegetable oil is not that good for you.
Mhm.
But I don't know
It's
how
a
accurate that is.
it's a very different topic for another day, but vegetable
Yes.
oil is based on a lot of seed oil, and some of which is not very good for you at all.
Hmm.
I've been using, especially canola oils, really, really bad for you for the most part. And then, but I've been using olive oil, which is good type of
Yes.
seed oil, but it's a much healthier seed oil. You know,
Hmm.
again, we could get off onto that little tangent on another
Oh
day, but
yeah.
you know, um, I think that it would actually help, diabetics to get on to a good, eating program, good dietary program, develop good
Yes.
dietary habits. My sister is actually going to give me a Mediterranean cookbook that I'm going to start using
Mm.
for this stuff now because I can't really do keto because
Yeah, that's a
keto
problem
really
for
demands
diabetic.
that keto. I have keto cookbooks, right? But keto, it's entirely possible to reverse type 2 diabetes, but if but however, I'll throw the caveat out there that it's really hard to do and not always possible to reverse type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
But keto, it can certainly help, but you might have to modify the keto diet. But I'm gonna try doing a Mediterranean diet. The dishes sound a lot more delicious. And they tend to be kind of like fish oil based among some other things. Good
Mm.
ground cumin too.
Yeah. I think well, for type 1s, snacks should be limited to like cheeses, nuts, especially jerkies. Those work really well for me because a lot of it is just mostly protein and fiber. So you're not getting
Mhm.
a lot of sugar from it. So those are good healthy snacks. Vegetables, of course, cucumbers, carrots, stuff like that is also really good for snacks.
Mhm. See, I've been, whenever I am able to, because it's not real easy at the moment for me to buy the best foods that I can, but I do get what I can for the price, because I'm fairly low income, and kind of
Hmm.
sucks living in a country where buying healthy food is so danged expensive. But I
Yeah.
still buy salads. I still buy,
Hmm.
parsley. I still buy onions. Matter of fact, I cut up an onion last night that I'm going to use tonight.
Yeah.
I tried to buy up the healthy things, the broccoli, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Now complex carbs, or like broccoli and like carrots are good for you,
Hmm.
because they don't release a ton of sugar into your body immediately. So it forces your body to have to break those down. Whereas a simple sugar like what you would get out of all of those dirty sodas, yeah, Mountain Dew, I'm looking at you,
High
Pepsi,
fructose corn syrup.
high fructose corn syrup. That's a simple sugar. Your body, you put that into your body at the same time as a carrot, your body's going to go after that first, because that is
Yep.
the easiest simple carb to
Yep.
dissolve,
It spikes
to absorb
sugar
to your body.
so
Yeah.
badly.
Oh, it absolutely does. Put it this way, Daniel. I don't drink soda at all. I've come to
Hmm.
universally hate all soda. I don't even do diet soda. And
Mm.
diet soda, my doctor and I talked about it, spikes your blood sugar. Yeah, don't believe that BS. It spikes your blood sugar. It's not diet. Don't drink it. Absolutely terrible stuff. For me, it's water and coffee.
Mm.
Coffee, jet black, nothing in it, no milk, no creamer, no sugar, no nothing, just coffee
Mhm.
and water. That's it. That's all I
Mm.
need, and I'm perfectly happy with that. Uh,
Yeah.
what do you drink, Dan, on a daily basis?
I do drink diet sodas. Like my experience, it doesn't really affect my blood sugars that much. I don't know. I'm not quite sure, to be honest. Like I drink diets. Um, that's about it. Like I don't drink any
Mhm.
of the sugared stuff. Like like
Yeah,
Mountain Dew. I don't drink it. I tried Diet Mountain Dew one time. Awful. Hated it. Never want to do it again.
yeah. My brother absolutely despises that stuff too, and he's kind of down to just having to drink diet sodas.
Yeah.
But I'm
I
I'm
have
helping, because my brother is also type 2 diabetic. So,
oh.
with me being diabetic, I think, because so I'm helping him with, as best as I can, managing his diabetes. At the end of the day, it's really up to him, but, it does pay a benefit in a way, that I'm kind of
Mhm.
going through this journey indirectly with him, you know,
Mhm.
but
See, for
it's
me,
kind of helping him get on a healthier journey too. Go ahead. Sorry, I
yeah.
didn't mean to cut
Oh
you
no,
off
you're
there.
fine. For me though, I'm the only one in my family with type 1 diabetes or any
Mhm.
diabetes. Like I'm the only one. And it's weird because a lot of type 1s that are diagnosed don't even have family members that have it. So it doesn't even seem like there's a family history to determine if you're going to get it or not. It's just random. And even
Yeah.
the JDRF still says there's no clarity on the causes of type 1. It just kind of happens. So it's either a genetic problem or an environmental problem, or it could be both in reality. So they still don't
I've
know. And if
I've
there
heard
is a virus that causes it, then the problem is by the time you catch that you have type 1, that virus is already dead and they're never going to detect it.
from what I've heard, in some cases, certain viruses, that you catch can potentially induce type 1 diabetes, because some viruses can screw your pancreas over to the point
Hmm.
where it just doesn't produce insulin, the insulin that you need to survive.
Hmm.
I've heard that being the thing, but that, like you clarified, that it's not the case for all type 1 diabetics, that each person's situation is unique and how they
Hmm.
got type 1 diabetes.
Yep. And it could be each one has a different genetic code for it, and that genetic code could vary from person to person. And there could be a different virus that sets it off for every person. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
a really complicated issue that we don't really have an answer to yet.
So we'll leave the research up to the medical people,
Hmm. Yeah,
the people that are paid to actually do all this, you know. So
but will
hopefully
they?
they'll, yeah, it's, you know, we'll get into that off stream there.
Oh,
So, but you know, managing diabetes if it's type 1 or type 2 can sometimes be difficult, you know, and talking to people myself, you know, having talked to other people that have had it for much longer than I had, you know, you can have your good days and your bad days, you know, but more
hmm.
good days than your bad. But when you do have those bad, you know, you need to check your blood sugars and say if it's like spiked really high, don't eat anything, exercise, try to burn it off, or uh,
Hmm.
take metformin, take insulin, or whatever. But if it's like over 300, you should actually consult a doctor.
Yes.
Because generally, if your blood sugar is over 300, that is potentially hospitalization. And so go to a doctor, they will help you bring that down.
Especially if it's a constant 300. The best way to figure out at home if you have it is to fast for like 6 or 7 hours and then take your fasting blood sugar. And if it's above 200, you probably have some issues. So that's probably the best way to figure it out at home. Because the
Mm.
glucose meters, they're over the counter. You can easily just buy them at Walmart. Some are
Yeah,
only like 25 bucks, some are like 75, just depends on which brand you get.
absolutely. I have a true glucose meter that cost me about $30. That's typically sold at a Kroger store, typically like QFC or Fred Meyer, at least here in my area. You know, there are a few other options around, you know. So when I was formally diagnosed with diabetes, you know, my spot glucose measure when I was actually being checked for other stuff. So glucose is part of your comprehensive metabolic panel
Mhm.
and basic metabolic panel. So when I had a comprehensive metabolic panel done in June as a part of my plethora of blood tests that I went through,
Mhm.
you know, to reestablish myself with my doctor,
Yep.
my spot glucose fasting, which was a 12-hour fast in my
Mhm.
case, was 207.
Wow.
Shouldn't be that high.
No, it shouldn't.
Yeah. That's when I knew it's like, I think I have diabetes for sure. You know, and then the A1C came back and it's like, yep, got it. And then I saw my doctor's notes on that and he goes, I need to get my patient in right away to see him. Hmm. So, you know, that's how I found out. So I have, I go through a local regional health system here called Skagit Valley Regional Health. So they actually
Mhm.
have this online thing where you can go to. It's called My Chart. For those of you that are on Skagit Regional Health stuff, it's called My Chart, and you can see all of your test results the instant they're published. You know, before your
Mhm.
doctor even sees them. So this is kind of a really really cool feature. But
Yes.
you know, don't make self diagnosis. Talk to
Yeah.
your doctor about those results. You know.
Unless you know a little something about like the blood sugars, A1Cs, then you can do that. But that's the only.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other things that came back, you know, I had a lot of protein in my urine. Not supposed to have protein. The very different topic, you
Oh
know.
yeah, I had
So
a an issue like that. It was kind of a scare because I like my microalbumin was actually really high for some reason,
it was.
and I was like, "Whoa, what is that?" So researched it a bit, and it's like it says it could point to kidney disease, and I'm like, "Well, that's not good." So I had a follow up
Mhm.
point with my doctor, and like it could be high cholesterol, which I did have high cholesterol, so we got me on a statin, and we
Mhm.
dropped the cholesterol, which normalized microalbumin. So thank goodness it wasn't kidney disease and it got sorted out.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, high cholesterol, if you have high cholesterol and type 1 diabetes, kidney disease can be very likely.
Yeah. Yeah. And same is true for type 2 diabetes. So when my microalbumin came back, you know, it was really, really high in June. My the protein in my urine, which is called proteinuria, which again, this is a very different topic. I'd actually point you guys to Dadvice TV for kidney things. Wonderful resource. He interviews the guy that does that show interviews nephrologists all the time. So I had proteinuria with a rating of over 1,500 in my urine, and that was back in June. So when we retested my urine last month in September, it went down significantly to just below 300. So the fact that protein is still leaking through into the urine, that's still a cause for concern. But we're really glad to see that it came significantly down, because like my doctor said, during one of those initial appointments, that he suspected that the high blood sugar was largely responsible for the leaking of protein in the urine. We're talking about albumin here. And so, but we still think that it's a good idea. I have an appointment next week or next month to see a nephrologist to make sure that I don't have other issues going on, in the kidney, because I'm on a solitary kidney. So I have to make sure that I preserve that kidney function as best as I can. And this includes getting my diabetes immediately under control, which I did. And I feel successful at that. Just one, I was born with one, essentially.
Whoa, that's
yeah. That's wild, but
that is.
Yeah, and my doctor also was born with one kidney too, so he has to go see a nephrologist every year.
I explain why you become a nephrologist.
Yeah, and this is just my regular primary care doctor. He's actually a really cool guy. So I'll be seeing my nephrologist in November, and so we'll get established with him. We'll probably, run different diagnostics on the kidney part just to make sure what it's doing. And so this is the thing that we've been talking about earlier is, diabetes. When you're having constant high blood sugars, God only knows how long I've actually had diabetes for in that 5-year period. So while it was doing runaway freight train things, it was probably wreaking havoc on my body.
It's probably likely. I know for type 1, they are saying that if you are going to have complications, like basically the earliest it will start presenting symptoms of those complications is about 5 years. So with me being at the 10-year mark and not really any complications, that's a good sign. So hopefully that continues.
I really hope that continues for you too, man, because all I can say is good health to you. Absolutely. And so I'm going to iterate the point again, guys. So if you suspect that you might have diabetes, this includes symptoms that are such as night sweats, constant unquenchable thirst, blurred vision, among other things, kind of like the inability to think, that I would actually say as a fog, confusion, headaches,
mental block. That's a
mental block. Mental block. Any other symptoms you can think of off the top of your head there?
That's really the big ones. Like they all present relatively the same. Is like that blurred vision, frequent urination, unquenchable thirst. Those are if you have all three of those, then you should probably see a doctor.
You really should see a doctor. So get that appointment set up. Talk to your doctor about it. And, your doctor will schedule you to get an A1C tested, because the hemoglobin A1C is like the most common test method that they use to gauge where your diabetes is, to see what your average has been, your blood sugar average has been for the course of the last 2 to 3 months.
And honestly, like living with type 1 can be stressful. It can be a lot, but once you live with it long enough, it's just part of life, and it's not that big a deal anymore, to be honest. It's just it is what it is. You can't really do anything to prevent it. You can't really do anything to get rid of it. So instead of just saying giving up on life, you just live with it. It's doable, but
absolutely, man. And with type 2 diabetes, it can be with the right medications, with the right exercise, with the right foods to eat. It can be very well managed, and hopefully you will never see those complications.
Yep.
I will actually tell you, I kind of told you last night, but I'll tell the audience here that I ran into a lady here at a local Subway shop, and so we got to talking about things, and the subject of diabetes came up. I actually happened to mention to her that I was freshly diagnosed. And she goes, "Oh, you type 1 or type 2?" Because she goes, "I'm insulin dependent." It's like, "Oh, you must be type 1." And she goes, "Yep, I'm type 1. I've been living with it for 45 years. Wow. And she goes, and so we just got to gabbing, manage your blood sugars well enough that hopefully you will never see those problems. And she said that she has never seen any major issues arise out of it, because when you're just running those blood sugars as best as you can, as managing as well as you can, then hopefully you'll avoid some of the big pitfalls of diabetes and some of the domino effects of later health consequences.
Yeah.
So
it's actually like, I know like managing blood sugars and everything is really difficult because trust me, I have 10 years of this. But sometimes that's better to deal with than something like heart disease or kidney disease or blindness even. So it's probably better to deal with that stress than what may come.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, and the other things that I'm working with my doctor with, is getting my cholesterol under control, which has been run away for years. I know that being a fact, and I've just straight up poorly managed it.
Yep.
I'm not gonna lie. I straight up poorly managed it, kind of ignored it.
I've had my moments with diabetes, so.
And so as a result, I'm on a statin called a torvastatin, 20 milligrams. And so my cholesterol, torvastatin, I guess, is really, really good for getting your cholesterol under control. And I've been looking a bit into that. So my test results on my cholesterol came way down from what they were in June. So that's another thing that went in the right direction. Is my cholesterol, because you have your LDL cholesterol, which is your bad cholesterol, and your HDL, which is your good cholesterol. So I have way too much of one cholesterol, specifically the LDL, and not enough of the other. You need the HDL to come into balance with the LDL.
My last cholesterol reading, my HDL was actually high, which was really good because it cleans up that low density one as well. So, and my low density one was low, so that was really nice to see. Because
can I have your cholesterol?
Right. But I've luckily I've lost like 50 pounds in the last year and a half because I went from an office job to warehouse jobs, and I got more active again, and my weight dropped significantly. So I went from like 250 to 205.
And I also think that my LDL dropped quite significantly, not just because of the medication alone, but also because of the fact that I did lose 45 pounds over the course of the last few months. So I really suspect that has a good chunk to do with it as well, So I'm going to keep going on the route that I am going, exercising when I can, if I can, and trying to eat the best foods that I can, at the prices that I could afford, and so on and so forth. What about yourself, Daniel?
My primary focus would probably be exercise, because what exercise do is help maintain weight, which helps insulin to be used properly. It helps prevent high blood sugars. It helps prevent nerve damage as well. And then, of course, I need to eat better. I'm not always the best at that, but change the diet to eat better as well. And that should actually work fairly well.
All right. Yeah. And I'm going to keep eating well myself as best as I can and avoid those simple carbs. So we're nearing the top of the hour here. So I think that's gonna do
We
it
can
for
probably
us.
go forever on this topic, to be honest.
Go forever, drag on and on and on and on. But I think we'll actually save some more of the subject for a later time.
Yeah.
So yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm good there.
Yep. So we're gonna save some more of the subject for another time, and hopefully we'll have Dan back on the show to talk about diabetes some more, or possibly some other topics that we may find of interest.
Let's just play
So
some games together. Why not? Like,
oh, there you go.
I just don't
That's
think I have
actually an
the
idea.
speed for it.
That's an idea. I should actually have you on one of my actual gaming streams too. So, all right, Daniel, thank you very much for giving me your time here and talking about a subject that is near and dear to both of us and to many millions of people around the country and around the world. Absolutely. So I hope that we provided the best information that we can to the best of our ability. And I did provide some links down there for you to do a little bit of your own research. And again, if you suspect that you have diabetes type 1 or type 2, go see your doctor. Get the test. Get it done. All right. This is going to do it for now. So my name is Tony Ortega, and I'm with Daniel Leonard here. And we shall see you again on another podcast.
Yes.
Have a